Hi, welcome to Box on the Box Rock and Celluloid. So I'm going to start a feature today of my top 10 favourite film directors. You may have noticed I did a thing called Masters of Cinema. I did Michael Mann, David Fincher, Brian De Palma. It didn't really work. I ended up talking about every film they'd done. It kind of went on too long. They weren't very popular. But if you go into those features, you'll see I've put in the footnotes my top 10 of their films. So I would have included them in these features I'm going to do. I just can't be arsed waffling about them again. So one of the difficult things with doing the top 10 filmmakers is some filmmakers just don't have 10 films. So some of these guys didn't make the cut, like Paul Thomas Anderson, great modern filmmaker, There Will Be Blood, The Master, Boogie Nights. Really great films. Enjoyed Phantom Thread, hated Inherent Vice, hated Punch Drunk Love. But he hasn't done 10 films. Magnolia is good. I think he's done 9, so we can't do a top 10 Paul Thomas Anderson. Same with James Cameron, who's only done 8. Love, Terminator, Aliens, Terminator 2. Less so sort of Titanic, Avatar. He's kind of got cheesy, the bigger his films have got. Sergio Leone, one of my favourite filmmakers of all time, has made 3 of my favourite films of all time: Good, Bad and the Ugly, Once Upon a Time in the West, and Once Upon a Time in America. And his other films are pretty damn good as well. Just can't do a top 10. Danny Boyle's got more than 10 films. I do like some Danny Boyle. Fond of Trainspotting 2. 28 Days Later is very good. Sunshine I really like as well. So maybe at a later date, but there's not enough of the other ones. I wasn't like kind of fussed enough. It's a bit too eclectic, I think, for my taste at times. Catherine Bigelow has 10 films, and she would be the only female filmmaker up to now who would talk about it. Obviously in the future you'd hope there'd be much more, and I'm sure there will be. It's getting better. But I haven't seen Weight of the Water. I've not seen The Loveless in years. But obviously Hurt Locker, Zero Dark 30 and Detroit are 3 most recent films are really good. Point Break's a great 90s action film. And Strange Days may be my favourite film by her. There's certainly like 5 really, really cool films we could pick from her. And Near Dark, 6. So, although her filmography is limited, there's 6 corpus there. Interesting career. Then Joel Cohen, because he's Joel and Ethan Cohen. Quite a tricky one. I'm not always into the Coen brothers quirkiness, but allegedly Joel's the actor wrangler. And Joel's the director, the visual side of things, and Ethan is the actor wrangler, but I think he's more involved in the production writing now. So Joel's generally seen as the director, even though the guy, but obviously, No Country for Old Men, Blood Simple, actually the debut from Blood Simple was one of my favourites by theirs. A lot of fun to be had in Oh Brother Where Art Thou, and of course The Big Lebowski. I think my main issue with them sometimes they're kind of too quirky and nonsensical for their own good. Fargo's good fun, but that's just me. But definitely people I consider. But my first choice today is one of the inventors, the innovators of giallo. And giallo's actually making a little bit of a comeback. We've had Barbarian Sound Studios' Peter Strickland film, and we're getting Censor, which has come out, and Edgar Wright's film, I forget the title of it. Obviously by the time I released this video, all these films will be out. But giallo is basically the amateur detective, really. Brian De Palma is influenced by the guy I'm going to talk about. You can see it's Dario Argento, the Italian horror maestro. So his giallo gets its name from the yellow-coloured Italian pulp fiction novels that are these kind of amateur detective thrillers that these types of plots are based on. So, basically there'll be a murder and someone who's an ordinary Joe will investigate the murder, and there'll be the police involved and stuff like that, but they will solve the case. They typically are psychological thrillers, and they have very violent murders in them. Lucio Fulci, Mario Bava also did giallos. Bear of Blood's a classic one. I think Lucio Fulci did one with Stanley Baker. One with George Lazenby, but I could be wrong. George Lazenby definitely did an Italian horror, one of his few films after Bond. So unfortunately, Argento kind of really tailed off in the 80s, or certainly after the 80s. And there's kind of more kind of, okay, it's worth checking out this film, the actual classics, but he is a director of note. Like I say, I mean, you can look at Brian De Palma films, some of his Dressed to Kill and films like that, and they owe a lot to Argento. And what typifies his early films is they have an artistic lushness that is not seen in horror. They have really great shot compositions that would be worthy of Leone or Michelangelo Antonioni. They have great lighting, great colour design, great use of reds, blues, greens. So there's a kind of level of artiness mixed in with kind of quite ropey acting and plots that don't make sense. But he uses the logic of nightmare, and one of his films will completely kind of do that, really. My number 10 choice comes in by default, really. It's Inferno from 1980, so this is the second in his Mother's trilogy. For his Mother's trilogy, you have Suspiria, Inferno, and then later on he made the third Mother, or Mother of Tears. That was in 2007. It's not very good. This doesn't make sense. It's kind of set in 3 timelines, 3 different places. But it has the lighting, the kind of lighting I'm talking about. And if you when you see Suspiria, you'll want to watch this. So that's my number 10 choice. Some good sequences in it. Number 9 is the third film in his Animal trilogy. So his first 3 films, the third one is Four Flies on Grey Velvet. This stars Michael Brandon. He of Dempsey and Makepeace fame. It's got quite interesting intro. He's a drummer. So it's got a whole sequence set in the drum studio, a montage of snare drums and stuff and microphones. It's the amateur detective thing, so he's trying to solve the case of the killer. It's just not very gripping, this one. It's definitely the weakest, but it's got a couple of cool sequences. The way to find out who the killer is, it's said that your eye photographs the last thing you see. This is actually used on another Italian horror called Horror Express. I think it's Italian, made with Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee, Telly Savalas. But basically, there's someone dead and they see an image photographed in her eye, and then it's got a super slow-mo car crash at the end. It's like super, super slow-mo. So there's some unusual ideas in it. So my number 8 choice is his second Animal trilogy film, is Cat o' Nine Tails. So this stars James Franciscus, he of Beneath the Planet of the Apes fame, and Carl Malden. Great Carl Malden, really good actor coming into the Argento universe. Doesn't quite have the slickness of his first Animal trilogy film or the lush visualness, but couple of good death concepts. A guy ends up falling down the lift, but he's trying to hold on to the cable, and you see his hands, his gloved hands all burning, and he gets blattered, and then there's a really horrible strangulation. What I should say, Argento films are very violent. They quite often have sequences where women are murdered pretty horribly, but males are as well. And they have grand guignol deaths. They have death concepts. It's not people that just die arbitrarily. They're kind of, there'll be a whole kind of build up, and it'll be shot a certain way. It's in that respect, some films like the Saw films and Final Destination kind of owe a lot to Argento in that respect. The Omen as well, if you think about the deaths in The Omen, those are the things we remember, the way it kind of builds up and is set up to this massive death. You get the head decapitated and it's cut from several angles. So Argento's in that style, and he's an innovator. But before this, you get kind of big deaths in horrors, but not like this. Carl Malden plays a blind guy as well. It's quite interesting. He kind of hears things, so he's kind of using his other sense of hearing. So it's pretty good. I describe it as second string, Argento, worth checking out. My number 7 choice is from 1987. This is probably his last decent film until one he does in 2000. This is Opera. So basic plot of this is there's murders happening at the local opera. The director is Ian Charleston. I think a young woman investigates the killings. I've only seen this a couple of times. But this is well known for 2 particular sequences. A sequence where the killer tortures someone and makes someone watch, and they pin open their eyelids. So there's close-up shots with needles propping up the eyelids. It's really horrible. And then there's a point of view shot. There's a raven, I think it's a raven. He's going around pecking people's eyes in the opera, something like that. And he actually, Argento and his crew set up a rig that's circled, so they put it at the top of the opera house. It's circled down, had the camera on it, and that created a circling point of view shot for the raven. So he's quite technical with some of his shots in a way that, if you look at a filmmaker like Wes Craven, for cinematography, he's quite flat. He doesn't kind of do cool camera shots. So that's something that De Palma did with his horrors. Was he bought in the slow-mo, he bought in the split screen, he bought in the Steadicam, you know. And again, Argento, although he wasn't doing it like De Palma, he's kind of there first with that artistry. So that's opera. My number 6 choice is one. This is his one good film from the noughties. It's Sleepless. What stops this elevating another notch is it's got that flat cinematography, like John Carpenter. Sometime in the 80s, his films take on a flat sort of colour palette that have none of the texture or layering design. You know, a lot of Argento shots, kind of Sergio Leone, Michelangelo Antonioni quality in terms of the framing. And like you remember those Carpenter films, all the lighting and lens flares and stuff, and all that went away from Carpenter's films. The same thing happened with Argento, but this is a good giallo, and it fits in with the amateur detective thing just because Max von Sydow plays a retired cop, and he's working with a younger person to solve the case, so he's retired. Again, it's got some good, you know, the good death kill concepts that we expect. And I remember I got this at the time, and it was quite exciting. And it's a decent it's a decent comeback. Unfortunately, after this, he just didn't kind of spring off from it. My number 5 choice is Phenomena. This is still Italian made, but it feels quite American. It's got Donald Pleasance in it, and recall Suspiria. It's set at like a girls' school. Jennifer Connelly is the American star. This at the time I got this from the video shop, and what stood out for this was it had a real heavy metal soundtrack. So normally used Goblin or Ennio Morricone. I think Motorhead on the soundtrack, Iron Maiden, very metal of the time. There's a horrible bit with some maggots. It's not great, but it's decent. I mean, these films I've mentioned up till now are kind of, 6, 7 out of 10 films. Okay, so, Argento's oeuvre is not consistently great. There's only, 2 or 3 really great films, but it's just his style is very influential. So my number 4 choice is Tenebrae. So this is his last giallo, proper giallo, until he comes back to that genre with Sleepless. Later on, after Sleepless, he makes a film called Giallo with Adrian Brody with its pants. I can't remember. I've seen The Card Player. There's various films, but they're just not very memorable. So Tenebrae, there's an author in Italy. I forget which city he's in, but it's quite kind of modernist. What punctuates this is its use of more modernist architecture. When Argento shoots exteriors, he'll typically use period architecture. But this is good. John Saxon's in it, and Tony Francesco. Mispronounced that, but anyway, they're the kind of American stars. This is one of the renowned shots in this. Is he uses something called a Luma Crane. So I think Polanski and Antonioni were 2 of the first guys to use this really coolly in The Passenger and the Tenant. In their climactic shots, this uses it to kind of go into an apartment. So a Luma Crane is a smaller remote control crane. You put the camera on there, and probably smaller, and then you can maneuver it into kind of gaps and get it into places where a cameraman wouldn't normally get. Now with digital technology and lighter cameras and freaking drones, it's just really easy to do this sort of shot. So it's still pretty violent. There's a bit where an arm gets cut off. Lots of blood. It's got kind of stark greys and whites. This it's pretty cool. It's got a modernity to it. It's not quite a classic, but it's good. So my number 3 choice is his debut film, The Bird with the Crystal Plumage. I think this is from 1970. I'm just going to check. Cat and 1970. So this is really good. Basically, an author, American author's visiting Italy. I forget what city, it's probably Rome. He witnesses a murder at an attack at an art gallery. So this is the first thing about this is that the whole art gallery scene is basically Argento laying down a marker with his visual prowess. It's got this weird sculpture in it, like a big claw. This gallery, it's white, it's very modern. It's got a big window, so the framing of the shots has got that lovely symmetrical architectural precision that we see in guys like Michael Mann, Kubrick, and of course Michelangelo Antonioni. And the whole set piece is really good. And then it's that idea, he thinks, he's seen something, but what does it mean? And he kind of misconstrues what he's seen. In that respect, it's kind of an influence. You can see the influence of Blow Up on this. And then you get and a later film as well that he does. There's a bit of that, and then obviously Blow Up will inspire the Conversation Coppola and Blowout by De Palma. So there's a nice link there. But this is really cool, and then the bird of Crystal Plumage it's the noise that the bird makes. It's quite clever. It's got a really cool climax, and you realise who the killer is and the whole plot. Not high on the death. This is more of a psychological thriller with, it's got deaths in it, but they're not the kind of ultra violence. It's more psychological thriller. It's kind of. You could watch something like Clue to something like that in terms of atmosphere and so on. It's kind of more like that. The Jane Fonda film rather than out and out horror. I really like it. It's really well shot. It's a really good debut. Okay, so my number 2 choice is probably what people would pick as his greatest film. For me, it's not quite his greatest. It's Suspiria. So this is probably his most influential film. It was actually remade a few years ago, and it's actually really cool. The guy who did that was the guy who did Call Me By Your Name and A Bigger Splash. Very good filmmaker. He did something sort of quite different with it and spun it a different way, and it was a good valid remake. But anyway, yeah, Suspiria set at a school for dance. I see in Germany. Can't remember, but it casts. Forget the name of the actress, Jessica something. She's in De Palma's Phantom of the Paradise. Again, there's another connection there. It's what punctuates this. He uses Goblin. Goblin's soundtrack is amazing. He has the word witch because it's about covering a witch's witch. And it's got an amazing opening. She arrives at the airport. It's pissing down with rain, and it's just really oppressing. They're driving through in a taxi, and the opening's kind of just really scary and horrific. But all she's doing is driving in a taxi up to this gothic house in the country, which is the school for dancers. This is where his death concepts, his big staging of deaths comes up. There's a bit where a girl, gets the throat, cut with the glass from a window shutting, and then someone falls and glass falls in them. It's got spooky effects. There's a bit where someone has to crawl through barbed wire. It doesn't make sense, the plot, and it's nightmarish, and it uses the logic of nightmares. The bit where the girl's crawling through the barbed wire, it's like in a dream when you can't move, when you want to run, or you're trying to do something, you can't get something done, you can't accomplish what you want to. It's like that. It's got that weird logic. The soundtrack's amazing. And the photographer, I think he used older film stock for this, Technicolor, so the reds are really vivid. It looks unlike any other horror film, even compared to things like The Omen, The Exorcist at the time, which are big budget American horrors. This has got an artistic look all of its own. I think Alice Cooper's a huge fan. Horror fans love this film, and it's an all-time classic. Okay, so just going back through his films, 10 was Inferno, 9 Four Flies on Grey Velvet, 8 Cat and Nine Tails, 7 Opera, 6 Sleepless, 5 Phenomena, 4 Tenebrae, 3 Bird with the Crystal Plumage, 2 Suspiria, and my number 1 choice is his 1975 film Deep Red. So this again takes the blow up idea. Our amateur detective, which is played by David Hemmings, who's the main lead in Antonioni's Blow Up. He sees something, he sees a murder and he sees a clue, but he can't work out what he's seen. It's really fucking cool. I'm not going to spell it for you. But this is the best giallo. There's another cut of it which has some really bad sort of comedy bits. Because he's got a crap claw. And I can't describe it, but the cut I'm talking about doesn't have the comedy-ish bits in. It's a little leaner. And if you see like a great print of it, again, you've got great photography, great shot compositions. All the killings, deaths are all kind of set up. It's mainly kind of stabbing knife deaths, but they're all set up really well. It's got this really creepy nursery rhyme. Sometimes I sing it to my wife just to freak her out, which is great. Really cool score with Goblin. This is Goblin's best score, better even than Suspiria. It kind of it's very prog rock. I actually saw Goblin play at the local venue near to me well over 10 years ago, and they had projections from the sequences as they played the song. So Goblin, an Italian progressive rock band who did the soundtracks for Argento films, some of them, and they're really good, really unique. Yeah, Hemmings is good, obviously casting works really well. He's probably the best actor I mean, Karl Malden's won the Oscar and he's a better actor, but in terms of having the character and the performance, I think Hemmings, you know, hits the pot. Darren Nicolodi, Argento's partner, is really good in this. Yes, it's got really cool deaths, you know, from start to finish. This film hits the spot, and it's nicely paced. I'm just looking. Profondo Rosso is its Italian title. That was the name of a local band. Yeah, it's 126 minutes, and I'm feeling the other cut might be 115 minutes, and that's just a little sharper. And it opens at a parapsychology conference, and the camera kind of tracks, floats through the curtains as if you're going into the theatre and you're performing on stage. It's just really good. And this is the one I think where, although De Palma made giallos before, this is the one he may have looked at for his later ones because it's just got that elevated aesthetic to it. So that's my number one, Deep Red. If you're into horror films, you obviously know Wes Craven, George A. Romero. You'll know Dario Argento. If you've never seen his work before, check out Deep Red, Suspiria. You know, you might enjoy. Okay, thanks for that. So we'll carry on with some more of these. I think there's gonna be about 20 of these. And thanks for checking out. Thank you.